Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 649th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Tony Bluestone and Ksenia M. Soboleva. We're thrilled to welcome poet Óscar Moisés Díaz here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for actual necessary decolonial work, but a reminder of place, of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustained and enriched the stolen land we are speaking from. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest and host. Artist Tony Bluestone has participated in multiple residencies and has had work in group shows at Rachel Uffner, Freight and Volume, and the Academy of Arts and Letters, and others, and also has performed written works at Storm King Art Center. In 2017, she was awarded the John Koch Award by the Academy of Arts and Letters. Bluestone is a teacher at Cooper Union and Hunter College. A New York-based writer and art historian, Ksenia M. Soboleva specializes in queer art and culture. She holds a PhD from the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU with a dissertation titled Fragments, Art, AIDS, and Lesbian Identity in the United States. Her writings have appeared in The Rail, among other publications. She's currently the Andrew W. Mellon Postdoctoral Fellow in Gender and LGBTQ+ History at the New York Historical Society and an adjunct professor of art history at NYU. And with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to you, Ksenia.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and thank you to the Brooklyn Rail, as always, for making this possible. Tony, hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Excited to be in conversation with you. And I actually remember our first studio visit where we were looking at some of the paintings that are now in this show. And we can get the slideshow going. So your show is titled Passenger, which is a reference to the Antonioni film of 1975. I want to hear about that. But I think I'm going to just jump right in and talk about something that I really like talking about, and I know you do too. So it's a consensual dialogue, which is, queer figurative painting is having a moment. And I am very interested in the discussions around, queer figuration versus queer abstraction, and which of the two best lends itself for the, representation of queer identity. And yeah, so I guess my first question to you is, how did you arrive at figuration, and what has your journey been?
Yeah, as you were saying, abstraction or figuration, I was like, Ksenia, it's not a binary, it's just like gender, it's there's it's a whole world in between, but yeah, I definitely am in the figurative realm, and it's kind of, I'm going to give a long answer because there's like queerness, there is so many paths that made me choose figuration, and it's shaped by so many things. And I think, I'm a contrarian and I like to argue. And so I think my first, inkling when I was a young art student and everyone was making abstraction, and that was like the zeitgeist, and
yes.
That's
exactly.
What was happening. Yeah. I was like, well, that's fucking stupid. You're just afraid to say something. You're afraid to make a crappy figure or something weird. And it's like, I'm not afraid of anything. And I'm going to do that. And also though, but that can only take you one so far. And I think, one thing that was really influential was my father was both a union organizer, and he also had a very long battle with Parkinson's disease, and I slowly watched him transform over time. And I use the word transform rather than fail or die, because I think our passage in life is a series of transformations, as is queerness. And both dying and recognizing your own gender transformation, queerness. There are all these kind of difficult journeys in which like one has to confront their relationship to their own body and other people's bodies, and how do we be in spaces with them. And I think getting to paint figures in my studio allowed me to begin to try to like understand how we change, how we transition in difficult spaces.
Yes. And I think that relates to your meditation practice as well, which is something I want to talk about. But first, just to say, I do not see them as a binary.
I know. I just
how dare you? But exactly as you say, I mean, figurative painting has gotten bad rep, right? And abstraction was really viewed, especially starting in the 1960s, as, you know, leaving all this room for ambiguity and fluidity, whereas figuration somehow captures a fixed identity, which is a misconception, of course, but there is this tendency to think that, you know, realism equals normalcy and figuration equals realism. And the latter is not the case, right? And so what I love about your work, let's talk about your work. We can move through the slides to see more of the paintings, is that it's not realistic, right? There is a very purposeful distortion of the figure, of the environment, and it's very I can't believe I'm about to use this as an adjective, phenomenological.
That's the right adjective.
It really,
I'm sorry.
no, but it's just like so snobby. Like who uses that as an adjective?
We do.
And it's a tongue twister too. And I had to play it in my head. Anyway, so, you know, phenomenology is very much at the core of your practice. And it's funny, I just assigned my students queer phenomenology by Sarah last week. And, you know, we were talking about how in queer identity, you have to experience disorientation in order to become oriented, right? And so in your work, there is this conscious disorienting that I find just so beautiful. And that captures queer experience in a particular way that, you know, is also something that I see in the work of Nicole Eisenman or Francis Bacon, for that matter. That's a tapping into a darker side of things, but, you know, and how the interior and the environment sort of pushes and distorts and so how did you arrive at these particular representational choices?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what I was saying about being with a body, and not just any body, like my body, right? And then and in the paintings, it's all people I know really well. So I know it's not random bodies, it's their bodies, you know, and it's what is how difficult it is to like actually be with a person. And this goes to the meditation, right? Where in meditation, you're not kind of, it's sitting there and trying to let go of these kind of preconceived notions, right? So like thoughts arrive and you let go of those, right? And so in the making of the work, it's like, I know what a person looks like, or I think I know what they look like, and how through the process of painting them, can I allow that process to inform something new, right? And like, so I'm painting an arm coming out, and then the painting saying, because I've studied painting and I studied a composition, it wants to extend over it because I need it to touch the image, right? So I'm following that as my cues rather than trying to follow the expectation of what I think a body should do. And that's like, if you want to get to the kind of origins of how my figures find their way in distortion, it's in response to the worlds that I'm encountering them in. And so how do they make sense of themselves within the spaces? So the spaces are twisted because the figures are twisting them. They're in conversation with each other. And it did come out of, I remember years ago reading the text that you're talking about, queer phenomenology, and being really inspired by that notion of like a table she speaks of, right? And how we're oriented to that space. And at the time I was thinking of like all these basic modernist objects, you know, like squares, literally, you know, and like how crazy it is for a body to come to know itself in relationship to these limitations that we've put on design or art or thinking, and how do we like come to rediscover ourselves in our relationships in a new way that isn't repeating the mistakes of like a utopian past, but actually allows for room for like a creation of a different future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how are we informed by the objects around us, right, and by our environment, and how as queer people, you know, as Ahmed says, how do we turn to things differently? How do we orient ourselves in a different way, even if it's something like, you know, the sort of at some point she negates this neutrality between left and right, and it's like, okay, what if we turn left where we usually turn right, you know? Now that we have this painting up, I know that you sketch a lot. You make a lot of sketches. And so what is that process like? For example, with this painting, is this, where did it start?
So, well, this is, well, the fun thing about this painting is this speaks to the collaborative nature of
I think I met this person on the right.
That's me on the right. Did you meet Zyler? That's Zyler Jane on the left.
Oh, I feel like at the Independent I met someone who looked like that, and they were with you. Who am I thinking of? Okay, please continue. Sorry.
It's okay. Anyway. So a lot of time. So my work, and also back to Ahmed, that this notion, she dismisses the notion that we're ever alone in our studios, like working, right? Like ideas just like coming. And I really am informed by the people that I am in community with, and that I will let them, you know, a lot of this show comes from conversations and interactions I've had from members of my community. So this was, I went to go see A League of Their Own at a drive-in. That did happen. I went with my friend Lydia. And after we watched it, we were, you know, joking around. This is a painting, you know, and she was like, okay, but it's you and Zyler have to be Tom Hanks and Gina Davis, you know? And I was like, okay. I was like, I don't think that sounds like a good idea at all, but I don't know. You're telling me. If someone brings up a painting idea like 10 times, and, you know, I'm like, okay, fine. You know, she wouldn't let it go. So I was like, okay,
oh, really?
I'll do it.
So if I bring up something 10 times, you will invite.
If you won't let it go,
know. Okay.
It's good to know. Because some people have good painting ideas for me and I forget them.
I have great.
Like, oh, great, just give them to me. Yeah, it's less work for me. And so I made a lot of sketches for this. I made all these like convoluted sketches. I had us at the drive-in. That felt important. You know, and part of the sketching process is like, why am I doing this? What do I care? You know, I'm trying to get at what do I care about in this? And so much of this show, what I was thinking about was like, how do we enter into a public as like thinking, feeling, breathing subjects, right? Like, how are we allowed to create public spaces for ourselves? Which goes back to like that notion of like, what are we contending with in order to make that public, right? And so, you know, I'm making this and I was like, oh no, you just make the painting of the movie and insert yourselves, because it's like, so we went to go see A League of Their Own, and in my memory, I hadn't seen it since I was a child, it was like this crazy lesbian movie where there was like these hot scenes in like a shower. And so like none of that was real. It was like the driest like Disney movie. It's super straight. It like negates, I know they just made the new TV show, but we're not going to talk about it. I haven't
watched it. No, I haven't watched it, but I need to watch it.
That's a whole other conversation. So I'm like, I watch it and then I'm painting this background scene and it's just so like, it's so Hollywood and it's so amazing the way like Hollywood shows like progress or like women playing baseball. But it's like, as I'm like painting that background, I was like, oh my God, like the American flags and the celebration of the military and like everything's hyper gendered, like the men are in the suits and women are in dresses. And it's just, but they're like, oh, but Gina Davis, who's so hot, right? Like she's a catcher and Tom Hanks is a drunk man. And I'm like, oh, and so I'm supposed to see, in my mind as a child, I saw this and I twisted it into a gay fantasy like that.
But we all did that.
We all did it.
We all did that because we had to insert ourselves into narratives because there wasn't anything that actually reflected our experience.
Exactly. And so it's like in making these paintings, it's like it's this way of showing that kind of like twisting that happens. And and like also showing like I wanted it to exist as an image, like as a picture, where me and Zyler become part of that in our own weird way. And that it's like, this is a picture that you're handed, like this is an image that exists that you're moving around. So it's not just an object, right? It's images and moving images that we're like navigating that have like a lot of resonance and power.
Yeah. As a fun personal side note, I had a huge crush on Jodie Foster. And so I watched a lot of Silence of the Lambs. And I inserted myself into the Anthony Hopkins character.
Wow, that's a painting. I won't forget that. That's
wow.
Wow.
When you are making sketches, out of curiosity, are they more realistic than the paintings? Like, is there then this process of distortion that takes place?
Yeah, they are more real.
The sketches.
Yeah, they are my way of coming to know the thing, so it's like, that's what the nose looks like. That's what the ear is. It's it's very alluring to sort of spend time trying to get, what is it to make a thing look right, to make it real, to make it believable. What are the terms of belief, right? And so I loved using the drawing as a way to understand that. And I make a drawing and I also make a gouache, which is like a watercolor, like very washy type of study. And it's like, okay, then I start sorting out how it's all going to fit together in a way that makes sense. And so when I'm painting, that's when like, if you go to The Gambler, right? Like there's that moment in that painting where the fingers just start to like break off. I don't know what slide number it is, but
it's the one where Tony's holding cards. I do also want to talk about this one though. Okay.
Yeah. It's like there's this moment in the making where it doesn't make sense for there to be a hand, like that reality is no longer real in the space of the painting. And so it's like, that's where it's like, I know what the hand looks like. I know what a hand can do, but what if the hand could do two more things? Because if a hand of cards is also a hand, then why can't that be a hand? Like, we allow ourselves to believe in so much, so why can't you believe that the body could do these things as well? Yeah.
And also the left hand, there's something going on with that. There's like
it's like it's a sunset,
like organ
mm-hmm.
out of the hand. I do want to go back to that other painting, Beneath the Skin, that we were just at. When I was looking at it at the gallery, firstly, I couldn't make sense in my head if it's two figures, or it's one figure and it's splitting, or it's a mirrored figure. But you know what this made me think of? Do you know the George Tucker painting, The Subway from 1950?
It's based on that painting.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's the same dimension.
Anxiety. Yeah, and like the subway has this construction.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Everyone?
I actually forgot that until you brought that up just now. But yeah, that was, I worked in the Whitney for years, and
oh yeah, they have that.
They have that, and I love that, you know, and I always was like, I'm gonna make my own version of this. And yeah, in that the people seem repeated.
Yeah, and there's, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a woman and she's walking in the subway, and there's all of these poles, and men in long coats are kind of creeping out from and it's this like social anxiety, and sort of like the subway is closing in on her.
Yeah, and like social isolation, and it's very Red Scare era, and yeah, and like the fear, and it was, you know, this was the only painting that was made that I conceived before the pandemic, actually, or like right at the time in like 2020 that started to happen.
So during the pandemic?
What's that?
Was our studio visit during the pandemic?
No, I made this before. I don't think you saw this. I don't think I had it with me yet. So,
okay.
Yeah, or maybe, I don't remember. But yeah, so, and it was just such like an interesting kind of, the idea had come first, and then the anxiety, you know, was really building, and we were still in the subways, like without masks at the time. And, you know, so I was just sort of thinking about the isolation previous to that was occurring, you know, like that kind of feeling of social isolation. But these kind of moments where you kind of like snap out of it and can start to see everything, you know, that's existing around you. And there was also this interesting thing with this that happened with the tracks and the ticking of time. Like you were asking about the figures, and is it 2, is it 1? And I sort of wanted it to be 2, and then I realized I just wanted it to be me. And so I was like, oh, I'll just make 2 of me, but it's sort of like that splitting that's happening of like
the subject.
Yeah, so where it's like, so it's that notion of like what can happen from like this side to that, like it, of time moving. And it was interesting to notice like the way the tracks are kind of ticking off time, and the way trains were this early way in which time became important in our culture because of like the arrival of trains. And then there's a kind of like, you know, as you know, in the subway, that isn't always true. So it's a kind of breaking of that regimen and that system. And also, this is in the background is an Elizabeth Murray mural. That's in the, if you all are familiar with the 23rd Street Station in Queens, and like thinking about an abstract artist, right, but really dealt with a lot of figuration in a lot of ways, you know. And she was such an influence on me as a young painter, and like thinking about like, she just kept coming into my life again and coming up, and I was thinking about like the way in which like those types of bodies travel over time and then can exist in the public as well. And like, and that you can see that pressures between like, oh, I'm attracted to this video game, and there's this piece of art at the same time, kind of creating these pressures and moments that add up.
In terms of the sort of quality of mirroring that's happening here, can we go to Little Deaths? That's the pool one, or the water. Yes, I love this one. And I think this one I saw in your studio, or I saw it
was a beginning. It was percolating. Yeah.
I love the way that you can't tell whether there is on the right, whether there is another person hiding under the water, or if it's a reflection. So how did this painting come about? And I'm curious about the title too.
Yeah. Well, this is also related to the title of the show, if I may speak about.
Yes, please.
And I won't get into like the whole film or anything just yet, but the title of the show is The Passenger, which is named after the Antonioni film with Jack Nicholson. And one of the main theme of it is our main character, who's Jack Nicholson. His character meets another person who dies, and Jack Nicholson takes on the identity of that character. and then you follow out him living in an other identity while people are also dealing with like Jack Nicholson's character's identity as well, and how that reverberates out. So this idea of like moving through life in these different vehicles, which I'll get more into a little bit when we talk about that painting. But that idea of, I love this idea of like dying every second, you know, or like dying and transitioning to another space or another person, or how you see yourself and how that mirror becomes an identity that moves out into the world that actually takes up space. And so the reflection or the person that you're seeing is a reflection of the person jumping, but it's like they have better form than the person jumping, or it's how they imagine that they might be landing into the water. And you see with the reflections happening on the left, they're departing from the skin and flesh of having a physicality and spreading into and out into the world beyond what we can see, right? Like it's in this water and we know that it's going to keep trickling out, and it's almost like it's speaking to another system that we can't see because it's reflecting back. You know, it's also, we know there's trees because that's reflected and we can't see them. So it's like, I guess, you know, when you first asked me, how do I come to distortion, right? And it's like, well, it's all around us. It's happening all the time. Like every time I see myself reflected back at me in the form of Gina Davis, right? Like it's a distortion, but I have to implant myself in that. And then there's the physical moments. I'm trying to like release, I'm diving into water. And in that moment, I can feel all the different possibilities of the body. And I imagine it's breaking apart in a million ways. And why is that any less real than the system of imagination that comes from you coming in on the screen right now in its own bizarre distortion?
There is something very interesting about queer identity and water as well. Like I have so many friends, queer friends, that were very active swimmers or still are. And then there was the Adam Pendleton portrait of Jack Halberstam that was shown at MoMA. And I think at some point Halberstam is sort of explaining this you know, beautiful potential of water to hold the queer body in a way that, you know, allows all that room for fluidity. And I don't know, is that something you relate to?
A little bit. I mean, I think of water. I have an interesting relationship with water. I don't love it. I don't love being touched by it because I don't actually like the way changing sensation feels. It was actually a big battle in my relationship this past few summers to get me into swimming more, but I really embraced it this year. So, and I think though there's a lot for me when I start to have a healthier relationship with water. It's about allowing myself to be like underneath a surface and be in a space that I'm not familiar with, that I'm not strong in. It's like a release in a lot of ways. So I think about water a lot, but I don't always feel at ease in that surface. And I don't feel at ease with much in life. So it's not surprising, you know, that is. And I think that does really resonate with me, like that idea of it as a queer space, because it's a space where things are always changing and never static. And yet, like when I'm in it, I'm trying to find ways to feel okay within that. Like I'll just float or I'll just swim, because if I'm swimming, I'm exercising myself. I'm like emplacing myself into this. And I mean, in this also, one thing with this painting too, I was really thinking about surfaces and can we be on both sides of that at once? And I think water is a place that allows that. And I was really thinking about like the surface of the canvas as this space that like I wanted to be able, the viewer, to both participate in the physicality of that, but start to think about ways to push through it and what's there on the other side of that.
Yeah, because you do, just the way that the painting is structured, you do feel like you're actually entering.
Yeah, you get the little dock area, you know, the little place to jump off of and join in.
And were these made, is one of these you, or were these friends?
This never happened. But I was saying, my girlfriend really loves swimming, and so I wanted to like give her that joy that I'm unable to like always be able to participate in. And so I was watching these two little children like really free of any fear, just flinging themselves off the dock and jumping into the water. And I was watching from afar, so then I really was trying to imagine us doing that and having that feeling of like flying and but not with endless possibility, with the knowing that we will land and go into this new body of water, and everything disrupts from there.
I wanted to ask you about painting others versus painting yourself, because you do make a lot of self-portraits, or you're in your own work a lot. And I also noticed that in the catalog there are a lot of just like photographs of you. It's like your paintings, and then it's like just photos of you. What's up with that? Yeah.
Well, you'd have to talk to the catalog designer about that. I mean, but you know, it is.
Look them off Instagram.
No, we took this. I mean, I think of like it's like everyone in these paintings is me, you know, like they're not. I have to say that because it's too sick for me to be like, that's what Crisito looks like, you know, like that's not fair. You know, I mean, it's a negotiation and it's an exchange. So my friends and, you know, both willing and unwilling collaborators, they allow me to see myself. They allow me to be, because they exist and they are themselves, but you know, they're these mirrors. And so I think the paintings, as much as they are of other people, but they're really about like how I have been able to construct a reality for myself that allows me to have the life that I have, you know, and that's such a queer thing, and it's so special, and it's like I want everyone to have it, and it's not that hard, but it's also impossible, you know, like it. And so so much of that comes from others being willing to do things, and others being willing to see, you know, what I want to do and mirror that back. So I think in that way, like the way everything's being filtered through me, it makes sense that there's so many images of me and my sort of personality that can sometimes take up a lot of space as part of that.
And do you feel that your community changes over time, or is it like, let's say for the last decade, would you say that?
Oh, it's never stagnant. No, it's always changing.
Is there a certain sadness to that though? Because I have that in my own life. Like when I think of, you know, people that I used to hang out with, or it's like, in a way it becomes this, you know.
Oh yeah.
Vanitas.
But that's the grief that is part of life to me, you know, like that it is sad. And yet at the same time, it's like, you know, some relationships evolve and change over time and some don't. It's sort of like, I mean, it's so funny because I can see it in the paintings. I'm like, oh, that's someone I haven't painted in. Yeah, I used to paint blah, blah, blah a lot, and they haven't been in a painting.
Or that person anymore.
Yeah. Or yeah, and like, oh, or it's like, I have not painted you in a while. And it's like, what's up with that? You know, like, you know, and so it's like, I think, I mean, every time I leave hanging out with people, I'm both like happy to then move on and also really sad. You know, I think we have one thing I do think about figure painting that I used to always make the claim why people avoided it was that I think painting figures is the recognition that one day that figure won't be there. And I think that grief is a big part of being able to be with people. And it was in American culture, I don't think there is a lot of space for grief. And I think of just being able to truly enjoy people, there is also a recognition that they won't be there forever. And so like, yeah, it is sad that things are like evolving, but it's also interesting and curious. And it's also a way in which we're like always both gaining and losing at the same time. And I think that's really important for me to make space for that. Because it makes a richer life for me and the work.
That's really interesting what you just said. Do you think that figurative painting leaves less room for metaphor than abstraction?
It can, you know, I mean, I like when you said that, I was like, maybe, and I got sad, you know, because
but you just,
you know, but I think it, you know, it depends. I mean, I do think, I don't know how much, I think that's something I've struggled with, because you go into, you know, museums and wall texts and they can be very literal as soon as you put something in, right? They're like,
I don't read museum wall text.
What's that?
Never read a museum wall text in my life.
No, you don't. So all I do in the museum. That's what I'm there to look at. And it's like, this person's from New Jersey and that's why there's malls. And, you know, like, and it's so literal that I don't notice that there's like an entire, half the canvas is red and pulsating and creating this like phenomenological, for lack of a better word, experience that's really speaking to the poetry of the image, and image as language and image as possibility for the poetic. And I think I don't think figurative painting is less poetic or less metaphorical, but that it has these other ways of being literal that can trap meaning and because in a culture of like quick answers, we, you know, and that's what's so beautiful, that we're gonna have a poet at the end of this, because it's like, you know.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
But also, you know, when you were just talking about grief, I was thinking, you know, about my own research interest, of the AIDS crisis, and how, you know, during the AIDS crisis, there was a real resistance in particular to figurative painting, because it was seen as sort of sentimentalist, you know, to like spend
you have like
time making like a large figurative portrait of someone, you know, when you could be out on the streets making work quickly, or there was even more.
But then you have like Martin Wong and like Frank Moore, you know, and those amazing paintings.
Yes, but that's, yes, and they're great, and I mean, I would still say that they are receiving their due recognition only now, and
right
than at the time. But I'm thinking about somebody, you know, like Hugh Steers, who was completely overlooked until recently, whose work is, you know, and
I'm not familiar with that work.
You're not? What's the other person's name? Philip. Anyway, but it was like, well, if you want to capture someone's, if you want to capture someone, just take a photograph.
Yeah.
Like, why spend, like, it seemed so sentimentalist to spend that time making them. I guess I'm talking about portraiture in particular.
Yeah.
God, Sam Nye is in the audience. Sam, it was the show at Bortolami had a show. I sent you photos of myself, selfies in the show. Philip something. Okay, please continue, and I'm going.
We'll get there. I mean, I think there's also something really interesting about like, I don't know, you know, it's like, what is the progress around like activist culture as well, or like even notions of sentimentality, you know, that often like, you know, have been like left out of that, and that, you know.
Yes, actually, I just realized what my question to you is.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I hope so.
Can portraiture be political?
Can portraiture be political? I mean, I don't think anything's not political. So the quick answer is yes. You know, like
everything is political.
Everything
queer is political.
No, I think everything. Well, like it goes. Everything's political because Everything is political because we're all body. I think as soon as it enters into the body politic, then it has a politic. It is coming from a particular perspective, and like, you know, that's the notion that like white men making high and abstraction are not political. That is like the most political thing you could do, you know, and yet it gets seen as neutral. So I don't see how a portrait's less, you know, less political when it's asking for participation in the shaping of like our world that we live in. How is that any less political than making a giant, you know, concrete cube that takes up physical space? You know, like I just don't I don't see the difference, I suppose. Yeah.
Who was it that said that what differentiates us from animals is our participation in politics?
Is it Arendt?
Yes, it might be Arendt. Also, it might be Aristotle. And it's Arendt referencing Aristotle.
It gets confusing.
Yes. This is okay. I have to admit to you, I don't remember seeing this.
Yeah, no, you didn't see it. There's a lot you didn't see.
No, but in the show.
Oh, you didn't see this in the show? It was right next to Little Deaths.
Oh, I was distracted by Little Deaths.
You had to just go to the right.
But this is great. That's that just looks like a butthole.
Oh, well, I think it's a butthole.
It is a butthole, right?
I mean, it's either a butthole or it's like
I'm like pointing out my screen as if you to see where I'm
this is, do you want me?
This is cool. Yeah, sorry. I'm just seeing this.
Oh, do you want me to talk about this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I mean, one of the things in this, and we were just on Cathedral for a while, and with that very much, I was like thinking about surfaces and images and how they operate in our life. And I was thinking about how does queerness get represented, right? And I was like, this goes back to the literal, right? Like fucking, it gets represented through fucking. You see people with like, you know, queer bodies naked with like fists and different holes and stuff, you know, and you're like, okay.
Art? You mean in art?
Yeah.
I was gonna say I don't see enough queer fucking in art.
Yeah, well, it seems like a straightaway to, but
another applause to Sam Nye. But yeah, there should be more fucking in
you know, and but I think yes, there should always be more
fucking.
fucking.
To say fuck on Broken Rail? I'm sorry.
Doing it. Right. There should be more doing it, and you know what it is.
You're good. You're good.
Oh, great. And we'll keep saying it. But it is, and it's also like, what else is it? You know, like it's like what is beyond like the imagination of just fucking. And so I made, and I don't make paintings of people fucking. I'm sorry, Samantha.
We're gonna go to a painting that, I mean, it's different, but we're gonna go to my favorite painting.
Okay, I know where you're going. They're in relation to each other.
It's true.
And so anyway, I was just like, oh, I don't make these paintings, but like, what if I did? What would the response be? You know, like, what are the flags that you can put in that let people know what you're doing? You know, and so I wanted to put in a painting show in which I became a person that made these group sex paintings. And so I just like made group sex paintings and put them on the wall, but then it's like a show, right? So I have to have friends in there speaking. And so I wanted to put two friends in speaking, but I couldn't fit them both in the space comfortably. So then I took one friend and I stuck her in front of a painting in a painting to be like, that's how we make shit happen, is we make it happen. We literally make it. And so I put her, so she's sort of real because you can talk to art because art is real, and that becomes a thing. And then at the same time, then I was like, wanted to get this friend some love on the left. And so I had the nakeds from the painting coming out and like getting up on her. And so, you know, so it's like, it's all kind of circling back on itself. And like, that's what queerness is to me, is like, it's like, you're not fucking, then you are fucking, and then you're in a great outfit, and then the outfit goes into a painting, and then that becomes a world, and then that exits, and then like makes an, you know, and then it shape shifts again. So
Yes,
That's
it's
how.
true. We have a lot of different forms of intimacy and blurred boundaries.
We have no boundaries and lots of intimacy.
True. Let's go to one of my two favorite paintings, which is, I just Googled lesbian sex. And it's different from, well, it's interesting actually that the two paintings that I like the most sort of stand out in different ways from the rest of the body of work, because this is just like, it's more of a close-up than you usually do. And it's also, I mean, there's people in it, but there are people on the screen of the spirit. And instead of, you know, drawing something that you're seeing with like real people. Anyway, I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Can you talk about
will you just talk about it?
Googling and sex and then
well, I always like to have, whenever I make a show, I always like to make a couple still lifes. There was another still life that didn't make it into the show. And this is funny that, it's funny because it does still have figures in it. The other still life actually was the only one that didn't have figures. What was I thinking about? Like, it was like going back to that notion of representation. And like expectation, you know, and it's like, I was like, what, you know, how much of the way in which we've been shown ourselves is the way in which we then try to make a new self? Like, how much are we kind of trapped by that? Like, even like I teach painting, you know, and I have students who will be like, I want to make real paint. I want things to look real. And I'm like, what does that mean? What do you think is real? You know, it's like, that is so conditioned by the culture you live in, what we decide is real and what is not real. And so, you know, I feel so many people are conditioned by the digital, by the image, by the commercial, by the thing that is quick and easy to digest and easy to sell and easy to move on to the next thing. I get it. You're fucking. I came next, you know, and so I wanted to do a painting of lesbian porn. I wanted to see what were the images out there. I don't watch a lot of lesbian porn. In fact, I don't watch really any because I don't like it. It's
porn in general or just lesbian?
No, I don't really watch porn. I don't. I have a pretty active imagination.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've tried. I dip back in and if you know, and I'm open to suggestions, and people always give them, and then I never look it up. But you know, who knows? That could be I'm sure I'm gonna get like a million like in the chat, like I'll like go to this, and I will eventually.
But this is not what I see when I Google lesbian sex.
Really, this was the first thing that came up.
Are you serious? Well, I haven't Googled lesbian sex in a while.
Just Google it. Just
I was 16 and I Googled lesbian sex. That is not what came up.
Okay, well, this got put into the Google, you know, update your Google search. Because that's literally what I did to get this, was I just Googled lesbian sex. And maybe it wasn't the first, you know, image, but it was definitely, it was on the top. You Google it, I think you'll find it. And so you know, and then I like, you know, when I first started making art when I was in high school and stuff, or I would, you know, I didn't have the internet, but I would just draw from pictures, you know, and I think a lot of people do that. They draw from pictures. It's very intimate. It feels very teenagery. So I Googled lesbian sex and I made this drawing of it. And the whole time I planned to have the keyboard in because I wanted the thing that allowed me to get to it to be there, the touch of those keys, right? Like, and like every letter, every symbol felt so much more sensual to me than the image of the sex. And that felt like, to me, it's like the coding, right? Like the coding of touch. I was like, I kept being like, when I was painting this, I was like, enter return. And people were like, it's not sexy. I don't know why you think this. I'm like, no, it is. Caps lock. That's friggin' eroticism right there. You know, like control, alt, demand, like command. I mean, it's, you know, it's this other thing too that happens with the keyboard. It's like I spent so much time, you know, like making it, and time becomes so alluring, and these little messages that you get when you get to make it up, when you're making the code and the sensuality.
But also for a lot of people, myself included, and I don't know if I'm like dating myself, but our first queer experiences were in chat rooms. For me, you know, so that like, also, you know, I've never thought about this before, but it's interesting how you sort of have to navigate a language for your desire without ever actually having practiced it physically, you know, and so you're like describing this thing that you're doing to someone when you actually have never done that. I've never thought about this before.
I mean, I think that's like, isn't mind body divide, right? There's like an early example of it, right? Like, and it's like writing a script for a thing so that you know how to enter it, but then when you enter it, it's indescribable, you know, but the script got you there, right? Because you were able to imagine it in some way. And I think so in this painting, for me, it's like the keyboard's this sort of like touch, even though it still is keyboard, it's a machine, you know, but it's like, it's, to me, it was the most sensual part. And then also, I mean, the drawing is too, obviously, in the image and in how it's painted. Like it's this, I put on like a lot of paint and scraped into it and tried to get the messiness that is a drawing of getting it right and erasing, like you're talking about, like trying to get something right. Or like when people are worried about like being bad at being gay, like I had a student, we were like I don't know what I gave them to read. And then I had this sweetest student be like, do I not know what queerness is? Like, she's like, what? I thought I was queer, but you know, and like that notion that you could, that we're all trying to get something right. And that is fascinating, because what is that? You know what I mean? Like you're saying, like, where did you get the language to do that? You know, and that's both the possibilities that language has and also the limitations that word has. And I think that plays with the kind of metaphoric.
Yeah. I love that you love the play button in.
Yeah, I was showing it to a friend. They were like, "Wait, I'm confused. Why is the play button?" And I'm like, "Because I drew it in, because it was on the screen. Because it's an observational drawing."
Yeah. Okay, I saw some of the images that you might be referencing, but I do think you made it sweeter. I didn't.
Wait, what's that?
I didn't see this exact image on Google when I just Googled it, but I saw.
You didn't? Okay.
I saw similar images.
Yeah. Oh, maybe they, you know, who knows? Things move fast. It's like they're over already. We're on to the next.
I like yours the best.
Thank you.
And then the other one that I really want to make sure we cover is Ritual. It's the smallest work.
Yeah.
In the show. Another close-up. I love it. So I like how you're setting your finger on fire. I don't know if it's you. Is it you?
No.
Oh, who is it?
So this is M. Rooney, and
oh yeah,
and this came about, as well as the title of the show, is she was working on her show, and she had written the zine about women in film, specifically talking about films of the 70s and dealing with, you know, the misogyny in them, and then also that they're amazing, you know, and all that happens in that. And she asked me to make drawings for the zine that she was making. And this goes also, this was really important to go back to the notions of collaboration, because this is one of my closest friends that we're always in conversation, and we're always talking about art, and the film conversation was just something we just kept getting into and returning to. And so I ended up watching, I hadn't seen a lot of the films that were in this essay, and so it was really fun to start to try to watch them and make drawings from the films. And so The Passenger was one of them, and then this was this isn't about it, but one of the ones I watched was Pink Flamingos. And in the movie, as I was trying to think of like, what am I gonna draw? You know, like what's gonna happen? The way that fire kept functioning in the movie as this thing that's like, whoa, like amazing, and it lights up the sky, but is also destructive. And I had never seen that movie before, and it's so camp and abject and bizarre. And I was thinking about like the ways in which like we can take the self to the nth degree, and like how do you transform it, and like the way in which our people are so interested in alchemy and transformation, and like so I asked M to like, you know, show me all her rings. She has tons of jewelry, and I got her this necklace, and I love that notion of like being in close with this moment where you're lighting the flame, and that flame is like flickering out and catching the light of all these parts. And I really wasn't thinking of the cigarette as like a negative thing. I was thinking of it almost as like tobacco, as like a way to connect, like lighting that, and as a way to like take a break. And I mean, I think we use smoking as a way to like pause and breathe and be, which we don't get a lot of time to do. And so it's interesting that in ceremony, it is used as a way to connect with a higher spirit. And so I love that notion that there's a flame, and then there's the other flame that happens once the cigarette is lit, and then all that kind of reverberates from that moment. And it's such an internal thing that's happening, and yet it's being, you know, brought back out to us with the fire and the lit end of the cigarette.
Yeah, it's like it's a point of connection. Plus that it's of course used as a, you know, intimacy, like lighting someone's cigarette.
Mm-hmm. And it's hot.
Yeah.
For a second, and it's hot in one particular place, right? And it's the focus, you know when you're lighting and it's just that for that moment, and it's so close. And the way in which like you begin to notice the parts of a person in that intimacy. And I think this like had to be like a close friend, you know, to make this, to like,
yeah,
just to know that I'm allowed in there. Like I'm allowed in that space. Like there is something with the paintings, even though we're not doing them from life. I need to know what I'm allowed to do with you.
I love this one. Even like the palette is slightly, the color palette is slightly different than in the other ones. I don't know.
This was the last thing I made, I think.
And I saw it as I was on my way out, and it's by the desk, and I look and I'm like, wait, is that also Tony's? Amazing.
Yeah.
I love this one. Tony, I really, before we end, I would love to ask you more about, because I know you're in a meditation group, and I know other people in your meditation group, and I know that for all of them, their practice is really informed by this meditation group. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I love that meditation group. We're a little disbanded now, but that's okay. We're, you know.
Especially in terms of thinking about death, and like death as a continuous, as a process that's always happening in a way.
I think one of the things that has been so important for me, and that I think that has really helped with that, is the way in which the longer I meditate, that my ego leaves. And my ego, I mean my attachment to like the way in which I define both myself and the world around me. And that there's a clarity that begins to happen, and that there's this certain way in which the world starts to present all these answers that I couldn't have expected. And it is in some ways very similar to hallucinating without having to take psychedelics in a way, because everything all of a sudden is filled with a newness and a possibility. And it's like, that to me is so exciting. And so it allows me in painting, you know, this one is such a good example where it's like the yellow and the green hold space in this particular way in which I can just stand there and be present to that. And then the bend symbol almost becomes like the interruption, right? The thought that kind of enters in into that space. And that space is it doesn't have language, but it brings also awareness to my own body. And I went on a retreat many years ago, and the teacher kept bringing us back into our own bodies, and she kept being like, your body is it is the intelligence, it is the answer, stop looking for it up here. And so when I think about painting, I think of the paint as the body. And so when I'm in my studio and I'm whatever discourse begins to happen, I'm very discursive. I remember that that's not important, but that the paint is the body, and how my physicality relates to it that's the conversation, and to tune into that. And it taps into a different sense world. So that's when you use the word phenomenological, it is correct, because it is about an experience. It's a sense felt thing that we can try all we want with words to explain these, but I can't tell you what it's like to put your hand outside of a window, and what that touch feels like with the wind hitting it, but it's particular and it has a very intense set of meanings. So that is how, the shortest way I can describe how my practice informs the work.
Yeah. Phenomenology, word of the hour.
Sorry, everybody.
Is this a film still from the film? I actually have never seen the film.
It's not from the film. It's not. It's just it's the passenger, and it's a car. I was like, in the film, it's what I watched it again after I decided that was the show and everything, and there's never a still moment. They're in a gondola, they're in a car, the camera is always moving. The movie's really famous for this scene at the end in which Antonioni builds a contraption in which the camera moves across, it like moves you out of the frame and then turns around. So the vehicle, right, like that, we're always moving in a different vehicle, and we're always slipping into the next thing, and that there's something always shifting. And so and these little, whatever the vehicle is, defines the frame for that instant, and then the frame shifts and we move again. And this was a memory of me and my friend EE. We took a car for a test drive, we rocked out in it, and took on this like air of like extreme fun and luxury, and pretended we were other people, and only because we were in this car and we were just not doing something useful. And and playing, this car that we actually used is EE's partner Zyler's 1988 Mercedes-Benz, which is, that to me is like the most queer outfit, because it's like, yeah, this is a luxury item. It was, but it's really a style thing, and you can only really understand it if you understand my style and my relationship to cars. And so there's even this type of play of like symbol and meaning, and it not being exactly what it claims to be, and that shifting.
Wait, so this is you on the right? You're
oh yeah, that's my hat. Yeah, that
so
hat is in.
Every time you look different in every painting. You're like, oh yeah, I was like, who's that? Oh, it's me.
Yeah, well, I feel like I want to look different, based on.
But yeah, but I mean, what you're saying is exactly the point, right? That we are constantly in motion, and identity is constantly in motion. So this idea that somehow figurative painting captures a fixed identity, right? That's the fear. You're challenging that.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of fun and impossible thing about it, and why I use scenes from my own life, is to try to capture the nuance of that impossibility, and not as a bad thing, it's a celebration of that impossibility, and what happens when we work with in between the spaces, of understanding.
Yeah. On that note, we have hit an hour.
Okay.
So I think
that killed it.
To questions, but thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I could keep going, but we can't.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you for that generous conversation about the work. It was such a joy to hear you two in conversation about the paintings in the show. We do have a few questions for you. So first, I'm gonna unmute our friend GE to ask a question here. GE, you should be able to unmute now.
Thank you so very much, Chloe, and thank you so very much for today. I'm so amazed and activated by this work on different levels, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit perhaps about how synesthesia or synesthesia, depending on how we look at it, works in your work, on your work, and how it can transmit essentials to us.
I don't know. I almost wonder if you have to answer that question, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's like, it is a synesthetic practice that I'm experiencing while I'm making the work. Like, I'm working very hard to make something vibrate in them. So when you see them in person too, you'll notice, you know, you can see it a bit in the slides, but there's a lot of effort within color to make things like create a physical feeling from that color experience. And I think in a way, like, it's like synesthesia, right? When things start getting mixed, you know? So it's almost like, I want you to have this thought, like, they're driving down the road and then you're like, but yellow, you know, or like, what, you know, like, you know, and so that's like, I can't give you words for that, you know, and that's okay. Cause it's, I think for me painting, and I think this relates to painting representationally, the representation almost is the word, right? Or it's the articulation, and then it's like what vibrates next to the word.
Exactly. I was thinking the vibrations, especially because I was getting like tonal vibrations from so many of them.
That's great
as well as music and all kinds of great stuff. So thank you.
Oh, cool.
Amazing. Thanks for that question, GE. The next question is going to come from my colleague, Eleanor.
Thank you so much, Tony and Ksenia. This has been absolutely amazing. I really can't stop thinking about the idea of water being queer. And of course, as well, Ksenia mentioned, it really made me think about Samantha Nye's work. So awesome that you're here. Hi, if you can hear me. But I would just, yeah, I guess it's just kind of a broad question, but just to kind of expand more, maybe a two-part question, expand more on that a little bit for a couple words, and maybe also just because I was immediately like drawn or, you know, thought of Samantha's work. Can you talk about some of your other like inspirations or, you know, art guides or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, just when you were talking about like Samantha's work, I started thinking about pools, you know, obviously. And then like I feel like so much queer depiction is like when we're on vacation, you know, like not working, and bodies of water, unless you're a fisherman, we usually like come to at the edges of our life, because for so much of not just queer people, but really everybody, that like life really happens at the edges of the time that we have, that free time that's ever slipping away. And there's something about the body of the water that feels like really free in a certain way. And like, when you asked like, who are your influences? I was like, who are the water painters? You know, I actually, I had a piece that wasn't, the other still life I was talking about was, there was two, it was a printer printing out this image of a Felix Gonzalez Torres piece. That was it was like the photocopy of the body, just a body of water. And I just love, I love that piece as this notion of an image, but I had it hanging in my house for a really long time, and it didn't, all the concepts around it didn't matter. I just loved staring at this body of water. So that's like a water painter. But you know, lots of figurative painters influence me, like the ones Ksenia mentioned. I mean, also when I think of liquidity, I think of like Angela Dufresne and her speed of how she uses paint, and how it's like everything's like crashing into each other in that way. And then, I mean, a lot of painters that influence me are my friends. And I was thinking about this earlier today, I was like, because Ksenia was talking about abstraction and figuration, and I mostly hang out with abstract painters, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Why do I do that? Like, Zyler Jane, who, I think of her paintings are so sensorial because they're really color filled, and they're numbers, but they're dotted or they're triangles, and they work on you in such a way. And I've spent so much time with her and looking at those paintings and really thinking about, like, how do you help? One thing that she always says that I love and I want to bring into my work, and that's why I'm so happy to hear what GE was saying, was that how do you give people a way out of this world and give them like something to feel? So, and Jennifer Packer is like another person that's actually very liquid, and like lets things disappear and move in and out of each other. So a lot of the figure painters I like are often, they're kind of like interrupting their own figuration. Obviously like Eisenman, who's like such a storyteller in her own way. And then Mala Iqbal, who just had a show open at Soloway. These are like all paintings of her family and stuff. And they're almost like these wild stories that are evolving. So I also just love painters that are willing to tell stories and narratives as well. I think sometimes story can feel too literal for people, but just like, there are these other ways of, especially in paintings, because you get to see the story happening over and over again. You get to make up all the different possibilities in that. And I really loved that.
I want to add that a lot of queer abstract painters have a past life in figuration, which
totally
I want to erase. And if we want to be really petty, we could just say they weren't brave enough. They weren't brave enough to stick with figuration.
I wouldn't say that. I would never be petty.
I would,
but they might not be brave enough. We don't know. We don't know their mettle.
We don't know. We don't know. Anyway, that was a great question. And yeah, and I was thinking also about Hockney right away and the splash and how
right. I forgot the splash.
When queer painting wasn't as like using that splash to sort of slurp up an identity, right? It's like this queer identity subsumed in water.
And it's active.
Yes. And it's emotion. And
it's both projecting and injecting at the same. You don't know which direction you're dealing. It's like
it's kind of like an orgasm.
Kind of.
I should write an essay on David Hockney's splash. I'm getting a lot of inspiration from this talk. I'm going to write an essay about my chat room experiences. The Gush. Oh well, there's actually a lesbian dance party titled Gush. So that's there you have it. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Ksenia. Definitely doing some.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Okay, our last question is going to come from Ty.
Hi, Ty. Are you in Fort Greene?
I decided it was an outside work day.
You are literally next to my house, I think.
You live near Bittersweet?
Yeah, I live like around the corner from Bittersweet. That's where
I get my
house. Yeah.
I love Bittersweet so much. They're gonna hear me ask this question, so this works really well. Thank you both so much, and thank you, Chloe. I've been like sort of rapid fire quoting you into our Slack channel because I'm just really excited. I'm sorry, so many things. I was thinking about the queer water thing and the pools, and I'm just having so much fun. Also love any mention of gush in a new social environment. Great work. But my actual question was that, Ksenia, come say hi. My actual question was that you were talking about wall text, and at Cecilia Vicuña's Guggenheim show, she like wrote the wall text herself, which was, I was like totally tweaking the whole time because it's such an exercise of autonomy and that we never see in wall texts. Like Ksenia saying, you never even read them. Like it feels like oftentimes something gets stolen from the artist in wall text. And to see Cecilia write her own was so lovely. And obviously, you know, she's like the incredible poet. And so I was wondering what you think about that idea, and if you would ever feel like you wanted to do your wall text in that way, or if there's something interesting in the like tension between a wall text not written by you and your work. That's my question.
Yeah, I would definitely farm it out to one of my genius friends, because they're so cool, you know, and like someone would, and it's like, that feels like me writing it, you know, if I can make that umbrella, you know, that kind of, and that would be fun. And we would collaborate, you know. I love this idea. I want to do it right now. I want to wall text up, you know, and I'm serious. I always read the wall text. I think it doesn't, you know, it doesn't control me. Sometimes I get upset, but then I calm down. You know, it's like, I think it's so fascinating because it's like this institution. And I think a lot of people come to museums and do read the wall text and take it really seriously, and they let it be an authority that guides them. And I think that's okay. I am really in support of like whatever people need to do to feel like a way to enter work. I do think wall texts are like often a missed opportunity. There's something very bizarre about the way in which like the frame, it's like this frame is coming in, you know, it's like this big heavy, it's sort of like the gilded, right? Like the wall, you know, and it's like, and then one day someone was like, wait, we don't need to do frames like that, but they didn't quite figure that out for the wall text, you know? And so it's like, you know, and I don't know what this wall text that you're referring to was, but, you know, and I do think there is something really beautiful about it being poetic and a piece of art. And I also think it's okay for it to be functional and help guide the viewer and let them in. I'm like a firm believer in radical inclusivity. And so whatever it takes to bring people into a work, into a space that lets them feel like they're a part of it is, you know, I'm in full support of.
Sorry, I got muted because I know the trucks were going by behind me, but that is all, yes, 100%. And I'm wondering, just one little follow-up, which of your friends you would ask to write the wall text?
I have no idea. Maybe Ksenia now. I don't know.
I was gonna say, I would be really offended right now.
Oh, right in. I mean, if you would. I know you're writing, you have the gush to write, there's a lot of gush writing. So if in between you have time, you know.
100%.
You write about gush, I'll write an expose about the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I'm too old for the woods. I haven't been to the woods. Probably.
All right, I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay, let's all mute ourselves.
Thank you so much. Those were amazing answers and amazing questions. And this conversation today has been fantastic. So thank you again for this. At the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with a poetry reading. And today I'm thrilled to welcome our Poet Laureate of the Day, Óscar Moisés Díaz, to the stage. Poet, astrologer, film curator, and visual artist Óscar Moisés Díaz has exhibited art in places such as the 10th Central American Biennial, the International Film Festival of El Salvador, the Queen's Museum, the Museum of Art El Salvador, and a solo exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art Costa Rica, among others. Currently, they serve as a contributing editor for Asphalt magazine and a poetry and translation editor for Fence. They were a 2020-2021 inaugural curatorial fellow at the Poetry Project as a member of Tierra Narrative. Recently, they completed a writing residency at the Atlantic Center for the Arts. Recent poems can be found in Schlag magazine, A Gathering of the Tribes, and Scalawag magazine. Welcome, Óscar.
Cool. Thank you so much for that introduction and for this lovely conversation. I never know what I'm going to read beforehand. Like there's never like a set list. So it's really based on the conversation and the vibe. And I love what we brought in about like conscious disorientation. And so like maybe this poem is some of that. I usually don't say much, but something, you know, we're artists here. So like this poem is based off a trip I took to Guatemala City where I was trying to do research about like this archive of photographs from like the first gay club in like Guatemala City. It's called Pandora's Box. And I won't say much, but I felt like showing these because they're like nearby. So the poem is called Mi estilo está claro. Charascuro marica, punks pissing anti-fascism posters, a Guatemalan theorist in a pink wig, an essayist as Ziggy Stardust, Durcal's voice from a jukebox that also screens soft porn, the elderly owner smiling on two fags gyrating. You know, Pandora's Box is all corporate uns now. Who you're searching for probably won't be there, pouring more rounds. Oral history of these Chinese joints, queer havens for half a century already. My eyes on the window's concentric fracture. On the other side, I had my first panic attack earlier. Huicho told me the quake in '86 knocked down El Divino Salvador del Mundo, that someone stole the fingers. Don't his hands symbolize peace when raised like that? Quiet nod as I trace the jagged outline of the break, 200 or so walking north nearby. Jesus fingers in their pockets, time wheezing here on Avenida 6 y Calle 11. Nafu said, Oscar's crazy like you all, so I'm in this crammed bathroom offering my magician card to cut the coke. In the quiet, ask if anyone here might know these two drag queens in these old photos. Hard to say, but the pageant tonight is the closest thing to time travel. Like Urna holding the broken horse head violin in that documentary. How she asked the elder if she knew the missing lyrics. Let me stand in the wind, she replied. So I stopped recording and the room got louder and it's friends kissing each other and kissing me now too. And it's my Malik moment and drag queens are the planet Mercury. I always try to read something like new or unfinished. And so this is a new sonnet. I kind of want to call it like mating call. I don't know, but it's a sonnet. Don't want to title a poem Iguazu Falls or think about your sublet ad. No good furniture to fuck on, but trust that I do, plus prickly pear tea, plus a new Schmeg 4-slot toaster. All the gossip you'd be the first to hear, like my lunch with Clementina Suarez's niece. Written in an unpublished journal, right before a poetry recital at some theater, Rocky Dalton making out, fondling a man's ass. Grand piano speeding down the ramp, angry owner asking, who's going to pay for this? First woman in Honduras to wear shorts, to wear lipstick, that wrote my favorite poem, A Worker Dies, replies, I wouldn't even give you a single plucked hair from my pussy. So there's some like, you know, gossip and stuff. This one's in the, this next poem is in the new issue of the Brooklyn Rail for September. And I was like thinking about rituals and the cigarette. And so here's a poem called Birthday Candle. So still with the fire. Birthday Candle. Ibn Ezra says the moon is festivity, the revealing of secrets, rules over peaches, just want to listen to Kai's peaches, let the clink of ice cubes announce me, this new Polaroid getting too close like Kawasi. I'm offering grapes off the stem, rocking that Rainer Werner Fassbender airport style on the tarmac, one titty out. It's really the Keanu sons. Been reading medieval poems, monks, horseback, archery, being crowned coolest for the day, passing out by the river. My paraclassitry days are over, but meat's frying, another street heightens. Ibn Laban says best time for an enema is when the moon is in Libra or Scorpio, applying to benefics, increasing in light. Drew Sweet 16 motorcycle with Keanu. Celebrities haven't talked like that in decades. Ordered that new perfume with the controversial reputation. Its defenders say it's sophisticated and unruly ripe. Am I at time? I can like never tell. But
You're great. You're doing great. Yeah, you're in
Cool.
time. Mhm.
Cool. Maybe just another quick one. It's also in the rail and it's a sonnet. And yeah, it's kind of like about hanging out at the beach at this like writing residency. And it was like in Florida and it was like a really like Trump beach. And we were all like queer poets hanging out. And so anyway, it's called Slacker Sonnet. Having our engine talks on the beach, Ellery's towel, Moravian devotional card side holes, increasing darkness shows the holiness. I always got a friend on the inside to open the exit door, chasing the ice queen down the shore, building bird's nests. That's the music of my people. Lydia says the key of D is like the D in God. We should buy a metal firecracker, save on parking. When you only got one microphone, you got to walk close together. you're onto something when people start to lie about being in the film. It's not about wanting just anything, but everything. You all seem to love going around inventing special occasions. Sandy Cookie falls on my face. Cool. I think that those are the ones that I had. I feel like, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for those poems, Oscar. That was amazing and a perfect end to today's event. So thank you again for sharing them. And thank you again to Tony and to Ksenia. We'd also like to thank the team at Freight and Volume for helping prepare in advance of today's event. And we'd like to thank the Terra Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, for their support of our growing archive. You can view today's event and our full archive on the Rail's YouTube channel. For 22 years, the Rail has brought together art, music, dance, film, theater, literature, and thoughtful social and political meditations in our monthly publication and in our public events like here on our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate to support our writers, editors, and operations here at the Rail. And if you're free on Monday, you can join us at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Umber Majid and Andrew Woolbright on the event of Made in Trans-Pakistan on view at Pioneer Works. We'll conclude with a poetry reading by Pony P. And you can now turn on your microphone and say goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you
very
all so
much.
much.
That was amazing.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you,
Thank you.
Oscar.
Thanks,
Thank
Ksenia, Oscar.
That was amazing.
Goodbye. Thank you.
you so much, Tony and Ksenia. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Bye, everyone.